In a penthouse overlooking the glittering Manhattan skyline, billionaire Damian Sterling delivered a verdict to his pregnant wife between the main course and dessert. He didn't shout. He simply uttered 5 soul-crushing words: "Pack your things and go." The fairy tale was over. Shattered and facing eviction from her own home, Lily expected lawyers the next morning. Instead, she was met by Damian's formidable mother Sophia, a woman carved from ice and Chanel. Her destination wasn't a shelter or a solicitor's office, but the hallowed silent halls of St. Paul's Cathedral, a place where secrets are buried and wars are planned. The crystal glasses on the dining table of Damian Sterling's penthouse apartment reflected the glittering skyline of New York City, each facet a tiny distorted mirror of a life that was about to shatter. Lily Rossi Sterling, 7 months pregnant and radiant, traced the rim of her water goblet, the fine-cut crystal cool against her fingertips. She had always found a strange comfort in the tangible and the weight of beautiful things. Tonight, however, the weight was in the air, a suffocating pressure that had been building for weeks. Damian sat opposite her, a silhouette against the city lights. He was a man carved from ambition and success, his features sharp and his gaze even sharper. At 35, he had built a tech empire from the ground up, a feat that had earned him the moniker, the Midas of Manhattan. Everything he touched turned to gold, and for the past 3 years, Lily had been his most prized possession. Theirs was a whirlwind romance, the stuff of tabloids and fairy tales. The brilliant billionaire and the art historian with a quiet grace and a passion for Renaissance paintings. He had pursued her with a single-minded intensity that had both thrilled and unnerved her, showering her with gifts that ranged from a first-edition Virginia Woolf to a private viewing of the Uffizi Gallery. He had promised her the world, and for a while it seemed he had delivered. But the gold was beginning to feel like gilding a thin, shimmering layer over something cold and hard. Lately, Damian had become distant, his silences stretching into chasms between them. He was home less, his phone a constant buzzing presence that he shielded from her view. When she tried to talk to him to bridge the growing gap, he would dismiss her concerns with a wave of his hand and a vague excuse about a difficult merger or a volatile market. He was a man who dealt in absolutes in profit and loss, and he seemed to have little time for the nuanced, messy world of emotions. Tonight was supposed to be different. It was the anniversary of their first date, and Lily had hoped for a return to the man she had fallen in love with, the man who could quote Dante, and who had once spent an entire afternoon with her in a dusty old bookshop, completely enraptured by her passion for the past. She had worn the midnight blue dress he loved, its silk fabric skimming over the gentle swell of her belly. She had even tried to replicate the first meal he had ever cooked for her, a surprisingly rustic and delicious cacio e pepe. But the pasta sat untouched on their plates, the silence growing colder and more menacing than the city's winter air. "Damian," she began, her voice a little shaky. "Is everything all right? You've been so preoccupied." He finally looked at her, his dark eyes unreadable. There was none of the warmth she remembered, none of the adoration that had once made her feel like the only woman in the world. Instead, there was a chilling emptiness, a void where his love used to be. "We need to talk, Lily," he said, his voice as clipped and precise as a legal document. A knot of dread tightened in her stomach. "Okay," she whispered, her hands instinctively moving to cup her belly, a protective gesture that had become second nature. He took a slow sip of his wine, a vintage that cost more than her first car. He savored it for a moment, his gaze fixed on some distant point over her shoulder. Then he placed the glass down with a soft click that echoed in the cavernous room. "I want you to pack your things," he said, the words dropping into the silence like stones into a still pond. Lily's breath hitched. What are you talking about? Pack my things for? What, are we going somewhere?" He finally met her eyes, and the coldness in them was so absolute, so profound, that it stole the air from her lungs. "No, Lily. You are going somewhere. I want you to leave." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. The glittering city lights blurred into a chaotic mess of color. For a moment she was sure she had misheard him. This had to be some kind of cruel joke, a twisted test of her devotion. "Leave," she repeated, her voice a fragile whisper. "Damien, I don't understand. This is our home. I'm pregnant with our child." A flicker of something, irritation, annoyance, crossed his face. "Yes, I'm well aware of that. And I will, of course, provide for the child. A generous trust will be established. You will want for nothing." He spoke as if he were finalizing a business deal, his tone detached and clinical. He wasn't talking to his wife, the woman he had vowed to love and cherish. He was talking to an inconvenience, a problem to be solved with a sufficient application of money. "I don't want your money, Damien," she said, the shock giving way to a rising tide of anger and hurt. "I want my husband. I want my family. What has happened to you? What has happened to us?" "Things change, Lily," he said, shrugging as if to dismiss 3 years of their lives, 3 years of shared dreams and whispered secrets. This isn't working for me anymore. This isn't working for you," she echoed, her voice rising with disbelief. "Is that all you have to say? After everything you promised me, Damien, you promised me forever. Promises are fluid," he said, a cynical twist to his lips. "They adapt to new circumstances, and the circumstances have changed." "What circumstances?" she demanded, pushing her chair back and rising to her feet, her body trembling. "Is there someone else?" He didn't answer immediately, his silence a confession in itself. He simply stared at her, his face a mask of indifference. In that moment, Lily saw him for what he truly was. Not the romantic hero of her fairy tale, but a cold, ruthless man who discarded people as easily as he discarded old technology. "I want you gone by the morning," he said, his voice leaving no room for argument. "My driver will take you wherever you want to go. My lawyer will be in touch with yours." He stood up, adjusted his tie, and walked out of the dining room without another word, without a backward glance. The sound of his footsteps on the marble floor faded, leaving Lily alone in the gilded cage that had once been her home. The city lights, once a symbol of their shared dreams, now seemed to mock her, a million tiny eyes witnessing her humiliation. She sank back into her chair, a strangled sob escaping her lips. Her world, so carefully constructed, so beautifully adorned, had just been reduced to rubble. And as she sat there, surrounded by the trappings of a life she no longer had, she had never felt so utterly and completely alone. The silence of the penthouse was a living entity, a malevolent presence that pressed in on her from all sides. Every tick of the ridiculously expensive grandfather clock in the hallway sounded like a hammer blow to her shattered heart. She looked at the untouched plates of pasta, the perfect swirls of cheese and pepper, now a mockery of her attempt to salvage their evening, to reclaim a piece of the love she thought they had shared. The food, once a symbol of comfort and connection, had turned to ash in her mouth. She stumbled to her feet, her legs unsteady, and made her way to their bedroom. Their bedroom. The word was a bitter pill. It was a vast, opulent space with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of Central Park. The king-sized bed, draped in $1,000 duvet, seemed to stretch for miles in empty, cold expanse. On her side of the bed, a well-worn copy of The Bell Jar lay on the nightstand, a stark contrast to the sleek, minimalist design of the rest of the room. It was a relic from her old life, a life before Damien, a life where her biggest worry was a looming dissertation deadline. Her reflection in the mirrored wardrobe doors was a stranger, a pale, tear-streaked woman with a haunted look in her eyes, her hands still protectively cradling her swollen belly. This was not the Lily who had walked down the aisle 3 years ago, her heart full of hope and a naive belief in happily ever after. This was a woman who had just been handed a termination notice for her marriage, a severance package for her heart. "Pack your things," he had said. The words echoed in her mind, a cruel, relentless mantra. What did one pack for the end of a life? What did you take with you when everything you had was tied to the person who was casting you out? Her clothes were bought with his money, Her jewelry was a collection of his lavish gifts. Her very identity had become intertwined with his. She was Mrs. Sterling, the wife of a millionaire, a fixture in the city's high society. Who was she without him? She pulled open a drawer, her hands trembling so violently that she could barely grasp the silk and lace within. Lingerie he had bought for her clothes, he had chosen a life he had curated for her. It was all a performance, she realized with a sickening lurch. She had been playing a role, the perfect wife for the perfect man, and now the show was over. The curtain had come down and she was left on an empty stage with no script and no audience. Anger, hot and fierce, began to bubble up through the shock and despair. How dare he? How dare he treat her like a disposable asset, a line item on a balance sheet? How dare he do this to their child, to the tiny innocent life that was growing inside her? This wasn't just about her anymore. This was about her baby, and the thought of her child growing up without a father, or worse, with a father who was so emotionally bankrupt, so utterly devoid of compassion, filled her with a ferocity she didn't know she possessed. She wouldn't crumble. She wouldn't fall apart. She was Lily Rossi, a woman who had put herself through graduate school, a woman who had a spine of steel beneath her quiet exterior. She had a life before Damian Sterling, and she would have a life after him. With a newfound resolve, she began to pack. Not the designer gowns and the glittering jewels. She left those behind, symbols of a life she now rejected. Instead, she packed the things that were truly hers. Her books, their pages filled with her notes and underlinings. A small framed photograph of her parents, their smiling faces a reminder of a love that was real and unconditional. The worn, comfortable sweater she had owned since college. The small silver locket her grandmother had given her, a symbol of a heritage that was hers and hers alone. She packed a small suitcase, a bag of essentials for a life she couldn't yet imagine. As she did, she could hear Damian in his study, his voice a low, steady murmur on the phone. He was probably already finalizing the details of her departure, arranging for the smooth, efficient removal of the woman who had become an inconvenience. Exhausted emotionally and physically, she finally lay down on the bed, not bothering to get under the covers. She stared at the ceiling, the city lights casting long, dancing shadows on the walls. Sleep was a distant, unattainable luxury. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw his face, his cold, dismissive gaze. She felt the weight of his words, the crushing finality of his decision. Sometime in the gray, pre-dawn hours, she must have drifted off because she was startled awake by the soft chime of the doorbell. It was a gentle, unobtrusive sound, a stark contrast to the turmoil in her heart. For a wild moment she thought it might be Damian come to his senses, ready to apologize and beg for her forgiveness. But a quick glance at his side of the bed, still empty and undisturbed, extinguished that flicker of hope. He hadn't come back. She wrapped a silk robe around herself, her heart pounding a nervous rhythm against her ribs. Who could be at their door at this hour? She made her way to the entryway, her bare feet silent on the cold marble floor. She peered through the peephole, her breath catching in her throat. Standing in the hallway was Sophia Sterling, Damian's mother. Sophia Sterling was a woman who commanded attention without ever raising her voice. In her late 60s, she possessed an elegance that was both timeless and formidable. Dressed in a Chanel suit the color of cream with a single strand of pearls at her neck, she looked as if she had stepped out of a boardroom, not onto a doorstep at the crack of dawn. Her silver hair was coiffed in a perfect chignon, and her blue eyes, so like her son's, held a sharp intelligence that missed nothing. Lily's relationship with her mother-in-law had always been cordial but distant. Sophia was the matriarch of a dynasty, a woman who moved in circles of old money and established power. Lily, with her middle-class background and her academic pursuits, was an outsider, a curiosity. Sophia had never been openly hostile, but there was always a sense of appraisal in her gaze, a silent weighing and measuring that left Lily feeling slightly inadequate. She was Damian's choice, and Sophia, ever the pragmatist, had accepted her. But there was no warmth, no real connection between the two women. So to see her standing here now at this ungodly hour sent a fresh wave of panic through Lily. Had Damian sent her to oversee the eviction, Was she here to ensure that Lily left without a fuss, without causing a scene that might tarnish the precious Sterling name? Taking a deep breath, Lily opened the door. "Sophia," she said, her voice hoarse from a night of unshed tears. "What are you doing here?" Sophia's gaze swept over her, taking in her disheveled state, the robe clutched tightly around her, the dark circles under her eyes. There was no judgment in her expression, only a quiet, almost sad understanding. "I think you know why I'm here, my dear," she said, her voice calm and steady. "May I come in?" Lily hesitated for a moment, then stepped aside, allowing her mother-in-law to enter the apartment. The scent of Sophia's expensive perfume, a subtle blend of jasmine and sandalwood, filled the air, a stark contrast to the stale atmosphere of grief and despair. Sophia walked into the living room, her eyes scanning the space. She noted the untouched dinner on the dining table, the single suitcase by the door, the palpable tension that hung in the air. "He told you," she said, not as a question, but as a statement of fact. Lily could only nod, a fresh wave of tears threatening to spill over. "Last night, at dinner." Sophia sighed a long, weary sound. She sat down on one of the pristine white sofas, her posture as erect and poised as ever. She patted the seat next to her, an invitation for Lily to join her. Reluctantly, Lily sat perching on the edge of the cushion as if ready to flee at any moment. "I am so sorry, Lily," Sophia said, her voice softer, now laced with a sincerity that surprised Lily. "What my son has done is unforgivable." This was not what Lily had expected. She had braced herself for a lecture, for a defense of Damien, for a gentle but firm reminder of her place. She had not expected an apology. She had not expected compassion. Why, Lily asked, the single word a vessel for all her pain and confusion. Why is he doing this? He wouldn't tell me. He just shut me out. Sophia looked away, her gaze fixed on the rising sun that was beginning to paint the sky in hues of pink and orange. "Damien is a complicated man. He is my son, and I love him, but I am not blind to his faults. He has a capacity for great passion, but also for great cruelty. He is a man who believes he can control everything and everyone. And when he feels that he is losing control, he lashes out, losing control of what Lily pressed, desperate for an explanation, for something to make sense of the senseless cruelty. Our marriage. Our baby. In a way, yes, Sophia said, turning to face her again. The baby, I think it frightens him. It's a variable he can't control, a commitment he can't renegotiate. It's a vulnerability, and Damien despises vulnerability both in himself and in others. So he's just throwing us away, Lily asked, her voice cracking, because he's scared. It's more complicated than that, Sophia said, a shadow passing over her features. There are other factors at play. Business pressures, things you don't know about. Before Lily could ask what she meant, Sophia changed the subject. But that is not why I am here. I am not here to make excuses for my son. I am here for you, and for my grandchild. She reached out and placed a cool, dry hand on Lily's arm. Her touch was surprisingly gentle. I want you to get dressed, she said, her voice regaining its customary authority. We're going out. Lily stared at her, bewildered. Going out? Where, Sophia? I'm supposed to leave. You will leave? Sophia said, a steely glint in her eyes. But you will do it on our terms, not his. Now go and get dressed. Something simple, something respectable. We're going to church. Church. The suggestion was so bizarre, so completely out of left field, that Lily could only stare at her. The Sterlings were not a religious family. They were members of the city's elite people who worshipped at the altar of commerce and power, not God. Lily hadn't been to church since she was a child. Church? She repeated, her voice laced with confusion. Yes. St. Paul's Cathedral, Sophia said, standing up, her brief moment of softness replaced by a renewed sense of purpose. And please hurry. We have a great deal to do today. She walked towards the door, pausing to look back at Lily. And Lily, she said, her voice firm, bring your suitcase. You won't be coming back here. Lily was too stunned to argue. There was a strange authority in Sophia's demeanor, a sense of a plan already in motion. It was a lifeline, a bizarre and unexpected one, but a lifeline nonetheless. In the wreckage of her life, Sophia Sterling had just appeared like a lifeboat, and Lily, with no other options, was ready to climb aboard, even if she had no idea where it was taking her. She went back to the bedroom and changed into a simple black dress, the only somber-colored item she had packed. She looked at her reflection one last time at the opulent room that had been her prison. She felt a strange sense of detachment, as if she were watching a movie of someone else's life. With a deep breath, she picked up her suitcase, walked out of the bedroom, and closed the door on her past. Sophia was waiting for her in the hallway, a silent, imposing figure. Without a word, she led the way to the elevator. As they descended the opulence of the penthouse, giving way to the sterile functionality of the elevator, Lily felt a flicker of something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. It was a fragile, tentative thing, but it was there, a tiny flame in the darkness. She didn't know what Sophia was planning. She didn't know what would happen next. But as she stepped out of the building and into the crisp morning air, she knew one thing for sure. She was not alone anymore. And that in itself was a small miracle. The drive to St. Paul's Cathedral was a surreal journey through a city that was just beginning to wake up. The streets, usually choked with traffic and a cacophony of noise, were eerily quiet. The early morning light cast long shadows, giving the familiar landmarks a dreamlike quality. Lily sat in the back of Sophia's Bentley, the scent of old leather and expensive perfume a strange comfort. She watched the city slide by, a silent observer of a world she no longer belonged to. Sophia, for her part, was a study in controlled calm. She made a few phone calls, her voice a low, authoritative murmur. Lily couldn't make out the words, but she heard phrases like asset liquidation, breach of contract, and moral clause. It was clear that Sophia was not just taking her to church for a quiet prayer. She was setting something in motion, a counteroffensive in a war Lily hadn't even known was being waged. When they arrived at the cathedral, the great doors were already open, a silent invitation into the cavernous space. The air inside was cool and still thick with the scent of old stone and incense. The stained glass windows, vibrant jewels in the gray stone walls, cast ethereal patterns of light on the polished floors. The silence was profound, a stark contrast to the emotional turmoil that raged within Lily. Sophia led her down the central aisle, their footsteps echoing in the vast emptiness. They didn't stop at a pew. Instead, Sophia led her to a small private chapel off to the side, a quiet, intimate space with a simple altar and a few rows of wooden chairs. Waiting for them was a man in his late 60s with a kind, weathered face and intelligent eyes that seemed to hold a deep well of compassion. He was dressed in the simple black robes of a priest. Father Michael. Sophia said, a note of warmth in her voice that Lily had never heard before. "Thank you for seeing us on such short notice." Sophia, the priest, said, his voice a gentle, reassuring rumble. He smiled at her, a genuine, unforced smile. "It's good to see you. And this must be Lily." He turned his kind gaze on Lily, and she felt an immediate sense of ease, a small unclenching of the knot in her chest. There was no judgment in his eyes, only a quiet empathy. "Lily," he said, extending a hand to her. "I am so sorry for what you are going through." Lily took his hand, his grip warm and firm. "Thank you, Father," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Please sit," he said, gesturing to the chairs. They sat, the three of them, in the quiet sanctity of the chapel. For a long moment no one spoke. The silence was not awkward or tense, but rather a shared space of quiet contemplation. Finally, Sophia broke the silence. "Father Michael is a very old and dear friend of the family," she explained to Lily. "He knew my late husband Charles very well. He has been a source of great comfort and wisdom to me over the years." She then turned to the priest. "Michael, I need your help. Damien has asked Lily to leave. He is casting her out, and she is pregnant with his child." Father Michael listened intently, his expression one of deep sadness. "I was afraid this might happen," he said softly. "I have seen the change in Damien over the years. The more successful he has become, the more he has lost his way. He has lost more than his way, Sophia said, her voice hard as steel. He has lost his soul. But I will not let him destroy this young woman's life. I will not let him abandon his child. She then looked at Lily, her eyes sharp and focused. Lily, I have a proposal for you. A way forward. But it will require a great deal of courage and trust from you. Lily, who had been a passive observer until now, sat up straighter. What is it? I have a house. Sophia said, a small private estate in the countryside about 2 hours from the city. It's secluded, it's safe, and it's a place where you can have your baby in peace, away from the prying eyes of the media and away from Damien's influence. Lily stared at her, her mind reeling. A house in the countryside, a safe haven. It was more than she could have ever hoped for. But why? Lily asked the question that had been burning in her mind since Sophia had shown up at her door. Why are you doing this for me? I thought you didn't like me. A flicker of something that looked like regret crossed Sophia's face. It's true that I was reserved when you first came into our lives. You were not the kind of woman I had envisioned for my son. But I have watched you, Lily. I have seen your kindness, your intelligence, your quiet strength. You have been a good wife to him, far better than he deserves. And more importantly, you are the mother of my grandchild. And I will protect my family even if it means protecting them from my own son. She paused, taking a deep breath. There is another reason, she continued, her voice dropping to a near whisper. Many years ago, when I was a young woman, I found myself in a similar situation. I was pregnant, and my husband, Charles, was not the man he would later become. He was wild, ambitious, and reckless. He considered leaving me. I know the fear you are feeling. I know the despair. And I know what it's like to feel completely alone. The confession hung in the air, a stunning revelation that completely changed Lily's perception of the formidable matriarch. Sophia Sterling, the Queen of New York society, had once been a frightened, abandoned young woman. In that moment, the wall between them crumbled, replaced by a shared bond of female solidarity. What happened? Lily asked, her voice barely a whisper. A priest, Sophia said, a faint smile touching her lips as she glanced at Father Michael. A kind, wise priest gave me sanctuary. He gave me a place to stay. He gave me counsel, and he helped me find the strength to fight for my marriage and my child. He helped Charles find his way back to me, back to his family. Father Michael smiled gently. I merely reminded him of his vows, of his duty. The rest was up to him and to you, Sophia. Your strength was what truly saved your family. Sophia shook her head. I could not have done it alone. And that is why I am here for you, Lily. I am offering you the same sanctuary that was offered to me, a place to rest, to heal, and to plan your next move. She then laid out her plan, a strategy that was both brilliant and audacious. Lily would disappear from the city. She would go to the country house where she would be cared for by a small, trusted staff. Sophia would handle the legal and financial fallout with Damien. She would use her considerable influence to protect Lily and the baby. We will not let him bully you, Sophia said, her voice ringing with a newfound passion. We will not let him discard you like a broken toy. You are a Rossi, and you are about to be the mother of a Sterling. You are stronger than you think, and you are not alone. Tears streamed down Lily's face, but for the first time in a long time, they were not tears of sorrow. They were tears of gratitude, of relief, of a dawning hope that she had thought was lost forever. I don't know what to say, she stammered, overwhelmed by the unexpected kindness. Say you'll accept my help, Sophia said, her voice gentle but firm. Lily looked at the two of them, at the formidable matriarch and the kind-faced priest, two unlikely allies in her corner. She looked at the stained glass windows, the light streaming through them like a divine promise. And for the first time since Damien had uttered those 5 devastating words, she felt a sense of peace. Yes, she said, her voice clear and strong. I accept. A slow smile spread across Sophia's face. It was a genuine smile, one that reached her eyes and transformed her stern features into something almost beautiful. "Good," she said. "Then let the games begin." The journey to the countryside was a passage into another world. The gray steel of the city dissolved into a green and gold tapestry of rolling hills and ancient woodlands. Lily slept for most of the drive, a deep, exhausted sleep filled with unsettling dreams. She awoke as the Bentley crunched softly up a long gravel driveway. Before them stood a magnificent ivy-clad stone house, a place of quiet old-world elegance that felt like a lifetime away from Damien's sterile modern penthouse. It was a sanctuary. Sophia had called it a safe house, and it felt like one. A small, loyal staff who had served the Sterling family for decades greeted her with a gentle deference that was blessedly free of pity. Sophia stayed for an hour, ensuring Lily was settled before departing with a final firm instruction. "You are to disappear, Lily. No calls to friends, no social media, nothing. Damien expects you to be a problem he can manage with lawyers and money. He will not expect you to vanish. Your absence is our first move. For now, you must rest and heal." The first week passed in a surreal, fragile peace. The house was a balm to her soul. She took long walks through the manicured gardens, the scent of roses and damp earth replacing the city's exhaust fumes. She spent afternoons curled by the fireplace with books, the quiet crackle of the flames, a soothing companion. The baby, as if sensing the calm, settled into a gentle rhythm of kicks and turns, a constant loving presence. Yet an undercurrent of anxiety remained. At night, the silence of the house would amplify her fears. What was happening back in the city? What was Damien thinking? Did he even care that she was gone? Her questions were answered a week after her arrival, not by a phone call, but by a discreetly delivered package from Sophia. It was a thick manila envelope, sealed and bearing no return address. Inside, a stack of documents was clipped together. A handwritten note from Sophia lay on top her script, as sharp and elegant as the woman herself. "Knowledge is power. Use it wisely." With a trembling heart, Lily sat by the window overlooking the gardens and began to read. The first set of documents was a body blow. They were financial records detailing the true state of Damien's tech empire. The Midas of Manhattan was a myth. His company was hemorrhaging money, teetering on the brink of collapse, under the weight of disastrous investments and a critical lawsuit he was poised to lose. His entire fortune was a house of cards leveraged to the hilt. This, she realized, was likely the catalyst for his sudden cruelty. He was a cornered animal, shedding what he perceived as a liability. But the second document stole the air from her lungs. It was a legally binding prenuptial agreement dated 1 week before her own wedding. It was signed by Damien Sterling and Chloe Croft, her best friend, her maid of honor. Lily's hands shook so violently she could barely hold the paper. The world tilted, the serene garden outside blurring into a meaningless smear of color. Chloe, the friend who had gushed about how perfect she and Damien were, the one who had helped her choose her wedding dress, the one who had held her hand and sworn eternal friendship. It had all been a lie, a monstrous, calculated performance. The final set of papers revealed the full diabolical scope of that lie. It was a chain of emails between the two conspirators, Damien and Chloe. Their words were cold, transactional, and stripped of all emotion. They laid out the plot in brutal detail. Theirs was the real union, a merger of two powerful families designed to save both from financial ruin. But Chloe's deeply traditional family required the illusion of a real loving marriage complete with an heir. An heir that, according to the emails, Chloe was medically unable to produce. And so they had found their solution, Lily Rossi. The quiet, trusting, hopelessly romantic art historian. She was the perfect decoy. She would be the loving wife, the public face of Damien's happy family, the vessel to carry the Sterling legacy. Her entire relationship, her marriage, her love. It was all a meticulously staged play, and she was the only one who didn't know her lines were meaningless. Her baby, the child she loved with every fiber of her being, was not a product of love, but a strategic asset, a pawn in their sickening game. A wave of violent nausea overcame her. She stumbled to the bathroom and wrenched her body, convulsing with the physical expulsion of the poison she had just ingested. Collapsing to the cold tile floor, she sobbed, not with grief, but with a rage so profound it felt like it would burn her from the inside out. The quiet art historian was gone, and in her place was a woman forged in the fires of an unimaginable betrayal. She crawled back to the living room, her mind now terrifyingly clear. The pain was crystallizing into purpose. She scanned the documents again, her eyes no longer those of a victim, but of an investigator. And then she saw it, a final damning detail she had missed. A series of large regular payments from one of Damien's shell corporations to a private, highly controversial fertility clinic. The last piece of the puzzle slotted into place. They hadn't just used her as a surrogate. It was far more sinister. They had used her body to carry an embryo created from Damien's sperm and a donor egg, ensuring she would have no biological claim to the child. She was an incubator, nothing more. Her hand went to the phone, dialing Sophia's number. It was steady. Her voice when she spoke was unrecognizable, stripped of all its former warmth and filled with the chilling calm of absolute resolve. "Sophia," she said, "I have the documents. I know everything." She paused, taking a breath. "And I know what we have to do. This is no longer about survival. It is about retribution." Sophia Sterling arrived at the country house with the cold fury of a gathering storm. She had heard the tremor in Lily's voice over the phone, but seeing the evidence spread across the antique coffee table was like a physical blow. The damning emails, the fraudulent prenuptial agreement signed by Chloe, the cryptic payments to a fertility clinic, it was a mosaic of betrayal more depraved than she could have imagined. The arrogance, Sophia whispered, her voice a low, dangerous thing. She picked up a printout of an email between Damien and Chloe, her knuckles white. "To use you. To conspire to create a child, my grandchild, as a pawn in a business merger." Her gaze, sharp and piercing, met Lily's. It was a look stripped of all social nicety, filled with a raw, protective fury. "I knew my son was ruthless. I did not know he was a monster." Lily was preternaturally calm. The shock had burned away, leaving behind a diamond-hard core of resolve. "They made a critical error, Sophia," she said, her voice even. "They thought I was weak. They mistook my kindness for fragility." Sophia's eyes fell upon the financial statement detailing payments to the controversial fertility clinic. Her mind, always a step ahead, connected the pieces with terrifying speed. The emails mentioned Chloe cannot conceive, she stated, not as a question. These payments. They didn't just find a surrogate, did they? They used you as the vessel. The horrifying implication hung in the air. Lily's body had been hijacked to carry an embryo created from Damien's sperm and a donor egg, all under the guise of a loving marriage. She was the perfect, unsuspecting incubator. They needed a believable mother for Chloe's very traditional family. Lily confirmed the clinical truth, still tasting like poison. A performance of love and domesticity, and I was the star player without ever seeing the script. For a moment, the formidable matriarch seemed to sag, the sheer evil of the plot striking her silent. But it was only a moment. The shock receded, replaced by the steely resolve of a general taking command of a battlefield. "All right," she said, her voice crisp and devoid of emotion. "This is no longer a divorce. This is annihilation." She began to pace her mind, a whirlwind of strategy. "This changes the rules. We don't sue for a settlement. We expose them for what they are. First, absolute proof. We need a prenatal DNA test to confirm you are not the biological mother. It has to be airtight and legally admissible." And then Lily asked, a current of nervous energy coursing through her. "And then we control the narrative." Sophia said, a predatory glint in her eyes. "We don't go to the tabloids. This isn't gossip. It's a crime against human dignity. I have a contact at the New York Times, a journalist named Clara Jensen, a Pulitzer winner. She eats men like my son for breakfast. We will give her the exclusive story of the century." The plan was audacious, a surgical strike aimed at the heart of Damien's world. The public scandal would be the final blow to his crumbling empire. The moral outrage would be a firestorm from which he and Chloe could never recover. They wanted a legacy, Sophia seethed. We will give them one of infamy. Sophia's plan moved with ruthless efficiency. Within a week, a discreet nurse visited the house. The DNA results that followed confirmed their horrifying theory. Damien was the father, but Lily shared no genetic material with the child she carried. The cold scientific fact was the final weapon they needed. Armed with this proof, Lily met Clara Jensen. In a quiet hotel suite, she laid out the entire sordid story. The journalist listened to her initial professional detachment, turning to visible disgust and anger. She promised a front-page story that would detonate in the center of their privileged world. All they had to do was wait for Sunday. But the Saturday before the article was set to drop, a ghost from her former life appeared in the sun-drenched garden. It was Chloe. She looked like a ship that had been dashed against the rocks. Her clothes rumpled, her face pale and gaunt, her eyes wide with panic. "Lily," she began, her voice a desperate croak. "Thank God. I had to find you." Lily rose slowly from her chair, her hand resting on the swell of her belly. She felt nothing. No pity, no lingering affection for the woman who was once her closest friend. "There's nothing for you here, Chloe." "Please," Chloe begged, stumbling forward, tears streaming down her face. "You have to stop this. I know you've talked to someone. Damien is losing his mind. He's ruined Lily. The investors, the lawsuits, it's all gone. He is the architect of his own ruin," Lily replied, her voice as cool and clear as the autumn air. "As are you. It wasn't supposed to be like this," Chloe sobbed. "I was desperate. My family was about to lose everything. Damien's proposal? It was a business deal, a way to save us. I never wanted to hurt you." A harsh, bitter laugh escaped Lily's lips. "You didn't want to hurt me. You befriended me. You lied to me every single day. You stood beside me at my wedding knowing it was a sham. You plotted with him to use my body to carry a child that you intended to steal. Do you have any idea what you've done? We can fix it," Chloe pleaded, her desperation making her ugly. "Damien will give you anything. A settlement that will make you wealthy for 10 lifetimes. Just call it off. Don't go public. It will destroy my family. It will destroy everything." Lily looked at the pathetic, weeping figure before her. She saw the pathetic, transactional soul beneath the designer clothes, a woman who had sold her integrity for financial security and now couldn't bear the cost. The Lily who had arrived at this house broken and lost would have wept with her. This new Lily, forged in betrayal and strengthened by truth, felt only contempt. "The time for deals is over, Chloe," she said, her voice holding the finality of a judge's gavel. "You wanted to save your family's name. You should have thought of that before you tried to destroy mine. You should have thought of that before you decided my life and the life of this child were acceptable collateral damage." She turned her back on her former friend's desperate sobs, walking back toward the quiet sanctuary of the house without a backward glance. The game was over. The truth was coming. And justice, she knew, was only a sunrise away. The New York Times article titled, "The Sterling Scandal, A Tale of Deceit, Betrayal, and a Stolen Legacy," was a bombshell. It was the front-page story, a meticulously researched and devastating exposé of Damien and Chloe's conspiracy. It laid out the entire sordid affair in graphic detail, from the fraudulent prenup to the secret fertility treatments to the cold-blooded plan to discard Lily once she had served her purpose. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic. By noon on Sunday, Damien Sterling was the most reviled man in America. The story went viral, a firestorm of outrage and disgust that swept across social media and the 24-hour news cycle. The words "Sterling Scandal" were trending worldwide. Damien's empire, already on shaky ground, crumbled into dust. His company's stock plummeted to zero. His board of directors resigned en masse. His business partners, desperate to distance themselves from the toxic scandal, severed all ties. The government, smelling blood in the water, announced a full-scale criminal investigation into his business practices. Chloe's fate was no better. Her family, horrified and humiliated by the public shaming, disowned her. The carefully constructed alliance between the two families was shattered, and the Sterling-Croft merger was dead on arrival. Chloe, once a queen of New York society, became a social leper, her name a byword for treachery and deceit. Damien, cornered and facing ruin, tried to fight back. He issued a statement denying the allegations, calling them a vicious and unfounded attack by a disgruntled wife. But the evidence was overwhelming, and his denials only fanned the flames of public outrage. He became a prisoner in his own penthouse, besieged by a mob of reporters and photographers who camped outside his building day and night. In the quiet sanctuary of her country house, Lily watched the drama unfold with a sense of detached vindication. Sophia was with her, a constant source of strength and support. They watched the news reports, read the articles, and fielded calls from their legal team. A few days after the story broke, Damien tried to contact her. He called her new phone, his number somehow obtained through his vast and now dwindling resources. Lily stared at the screen at the name that had once made her heart flutter, and felt nothing but a cold, empty pity. She let it ring until it went to voicemail. He left a message, his voice a ragged, desperate plea. He was sorry, he said. He had made a terrible mistake. He loved her. He had always loved her. He wanted her back. He wanted his family back. It was the desperate rambling of a drowning man, a pathetic attempt to rewrite history and salvage something from the wreckage of his life. Lily deleted the message without a second thought. A week later, just as the media frenzy was beginning to die down, Lily went into labor. It was a long and difficult birth, but at the end of it, she was holding a beautiful, healthy baby boy in her arms. He had a shock of dark hair, just like Damien's, but he had his mother's quiet, watchful eyes. She named him Nicholas after her grandfather, a man of simple integrity and unwavering kindness. As she lay in her hospital bed, her son sleeping peacefully in her arms, she felt a sense of peace she had not known in a long time. The war was over. She had won. But it was a victory that had come at a great cost. Her life had been torn apart. Her heart had been broken, and her innocence had been shattered. She had been forced to become a warrior, a strategist, a woman she had never imagined she could be. Sophia came to visit her in the hospital, her eyes softening as she looked at her new grandson. She held him with a tenderness that belied her formidable reputation. "He's beautiful, Lily," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "He's a survivor, just like his mother." She handed Lily a large envelope. "This is for you," she said. "A new beginning." Inside, Lily found a series of documents. Sophia, using her considerable legal and financial prowess, had systematically dismantled what was left of Damien's assets. She had established a trust fund for Nicholas that would ensure he was taken care of for the rest of his life. She had also created a foundation in Lily's name, a charitable organization dedicated to helping women who had been victims of emotional and financial abuse. But the most important document was a deed. Sophia had signed over the country house to Lily, giving her and Nicholas a safe and permanent home, a place where they could build a new life far away from the ghosts of the past. "I can't accept this," Lily said, overwhelmed by the generosity. "You must." Sophia insisted. "It's the least you deserve. And besides," she added, a faint smile on her lips, "I want to be able to visit my grandson whenever I want." In the months that followed, Lily settled into her new life. She was a mother, a philanthropist, a woman of independent means. She was no longer Mrs. Sterling, the billionaire's wife. She was Lily Rossi, a woman who had faced the worst of human nature and had emerged stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. She never saw Damien or Chloe again. The last she heard, Damien was facing a long prison sentence for a litany of financial crimes. His name forever tarnished his empire, a distant memory. Chloe had disappeared from public life, a disgraced and broken woman. Sometimes in the quiet moments of the night when she was rocking Nicholas to sleep, Lily would think about the man who had almost destroyed her. She felt no hatred, no anger only a profound and bottomless pity. He was a man who had everything and nothing, a man who had traded his soul for a kingdom of gold and had ended up with nothing but ashes. Her life was not a fairy tale. It was something better. It was real. It was a life she had fought for, a life she had built on the foundations of truth and resilience. And as she looked at her son, her beautiful, precious son, she knew that she had made the right choice. She had chosen truth over lies, courage over fear, and love over everything else, and that she knew was a legacy worth fighting for. The Sterling family saga is a powerful reminder that wealth can't buy happiness, and the strongest bonds are often forged in the fires of adversity. Lily's journey from a discarded wife to a woman of strength, Damien's painful path to redemption, and Sophia's unwavering faith all weave together to create a story of betrayal, forgiveness, and the enduring power of a mother's love. It shows us that even in the darkest of times, there is hope for a new dawn. The hum of the ultrasound machine was supposed to be the soundtrack to the happiest day of her life. They were about to see their baby for the first time. Her husband, Torin, a man who could buy cities, held her hand, his grip like ice. As the doctor showed them the tiny beating heart, he leaned in, his voice a venomous whisper meant only for her. What a mistake. He thought his secret was safe. He thought his money could bury the truth. But he never counted on the doctor in that room, a woman who saw more than just a picture on a screen. She saw his lie, and she was about to reveal a shocking truth that would shatter a gilded world forever. The silence in the Bentley was a familiar character in their marriage. It was a heavy, opulent silence, cushioned by hand-stitched leather and the whisper-quiet engine, but a silence nonetheless. Torin Hawthorne, her husband of 3 years, drove with an unnerving stillness, his eyes fixed on the rain-slicked streets of New York City. His profile, sharp and handsome like a Roman coin, was a mask of serene indifference. To the outside world, he was a titan of industry, the brilliant CEO of Hawthorne Holdings, a man whose Midas touch turned every venture into gold. To Katya, he was becoming a beautiful, unknowable stranger. Their home, a sprawling penthouse on Park Avenue that Torin called the Observatory, for its floor-to-ceiling windows felt less like a home and more like a museum. Every piece of art, every piece of furniture had been chosen by him. Her life, she was beginning to realize, had also been curated. She had been a promising art historian at the Met when they met. He had swept her off her feet with a whirlwind romance that felt like a fairy tale, dinners in Paris, surprise trips to see the northern lights, a blinding diamond that felt more like a beautiful handcuff. He had convinced her to leave her job. An artist needs a patron, Katya, he'd said, and a historian needs to be surrounded by history in the making. Your work is me now. It's us. And she, blinded by love and the sheer force of his personality, had agreed. Now her days were a structured series of luncheons with the wives of his business associates, charity galas, where her only role was to smile, and where his chosen designer, and long quiet afternoons, staring out at a city she lived in but no longer felt a part of. The pregnancy had been her idea, a desperate attempt to build a bridge across the growing chasm between them. She thought a baby, a piece of both of them, would force him to see her again, not just the polished accessory on his arm. When she told him, his reaction was muted. A flicker of something unreadable in his cool gray eyes, a tight smile. A Hawthorne air, he'd said the words tasting of legacy and lineage, not love and joy. We'll need to adjust the nursery plans. The ride to the renowned obstetrician Dr. Anya Sharma was no different. He hadn't wanted to come. It's the 20-week scan, Torin, she had pleaded. We'll find out the gender. It's important. He had sighed, a long-suffering sound. I have the merger with Sterling Thorne, Katya. It's a delicate phase. This is more important than Sterling Thorne. She had said, a rare spark of defiance flashing within her. His jaw had tightened. Fine. I'll move my meeting with Mr. Sterling. But let's be efficient. Now in the sterile, quiet room, the scent of antiseptic cleaner sharp in the air, That efficiency was all he radiated. He checked his Patek Philippe watch twice while the technician prepped her. Katya lay on the examination table, the paper crinkling beneath her, her stomach bare and covered in a cold, clear gel. Dr. Sharma entered with a warm smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She was a sharp, observant woman in her late 40s with a reputation for being one of the best. Mr. and Mrs. Hawthorne, ready for the big show. Ready as we'll ever be, Katya said, trying to inject some lightness into the room. Torrance simply nodded, his gaze fixed on the large monitor. The technician, a young woman named Chloe, moved the transducer across Katya's belly. A monochrome world swirled into existence on the screen. It was abstract at first, a collection of shadows and light. Then Chloe pointed, and there we are. See that little flicker? That's the heartbeat. Strong and steady. Tears instantly welled in Katya's eyes. A tiny pulsating light in the darkness. It was real. A life. Her baby. She turned to Torrin, her heart overflowing, expecting to see a reflection of her own awe. His face was stone. He wasn't looking at the heartbeat. He was looking at the vague outline of a tiny head, the curve of a minuscule spine. His hand, which had been resting limply on hers, tightened. She thought it was a gesture of shared emotion until he leaned in, his lips brushing her ear. The warmth of his breath was a stark contrast to the icy cruelty of his words. It's a mistake. The whisper was so low, so venomous, it was like a snake bite. For a heartbeat, she thought she'd misheard. The hum of the machine, the doctor's cheerful commentary, surely she'd imagined it. But then she saw the subtle shift in his jaw, the cold finality in his eyes as he looked away from the screen and stared at a blank spot on the wall. He had said it. He had looked at their child, their miracle, and declared it a mistake. The air rushed out of her lungs. The tears that had been tears of joy turned to ash, burning her cheeks. Her hand went cold in his. The room, which had felt full of life and promise a moment before, was suddenly a tomb. Dr. Sharma and Chloe were oblivious, their professional chatter filling the void. Everything looks perfect, Katya. Limbs are all there. Measurements are right on track. Do you want to know the gender? Her voice was a strangled whisper. I don't know. Torrin released her hand and stood up, smoothing his bespoke suit jacket. I have to take a call. The Sterling-Thorne merger won't wait. He looked at Dr. Sharma, a mask of polite apology firmly in place. Doctor, please send the bill to my office. Katya, my driver, Thomas, will take you home. He didn't look at her. He didn't look at the screen again. He just walked out, leaving her half-naked on a paper-lined table with the ghost of his words echoing in the silent spaces of her heart. A mistake. Her baby. Their baby. A mistake. Dr. Sharma's cheerful demeanor had vanished. She looked from the empty doorway back to Katya's tear-streaked face. She turned to Chloe. Chloe, could you give Mrs. Hawthorne some privacy to get dressed? And please hold all my calls for the next 15 minutes. Once Chloe had left Dr. Chasur, Sharma pulled a stool over her expression, a mixture of professional concern and something deeper. Something intensely human. She saw the devastation. She had to have seen Torrin's chilling detachment. Katya, she said softly, her voice a lifeline. Deep breaths. Can you tell me what happened just now? Katya shook her head, a sob catching in her throat. He said. She couldn't repeat it. Saying it out loud would make it irrevocably real. Dr. Sharma didn't press. She simply placed a comforting hand on Katya's arm. Torrin's reaction was unusual, especially for a first-time father. Her eyes, sharp and intelligent, held Katya's. I have been a patient of the Hawthorne family's preferred hospital network for years. Torrin's medical file is extensive. I took the liberty of reviewing it before this appointment as a matter of due diligence. Katya frowned, confused. His medical file? Why, doctor? Sharma hesitated, as if weighing her next words on a scale of professional ethics versus human decency. There was a notation from his primary care physician, a Dr. Alistair Finch, to cross-reference his records with any spousal maternity care. It was an odd flag, so I looked into it. She took a deep breath. Katja, what I'm about to tell you is a serious breach of patient confidentiality. But given what I just witnessed, I believe it is a matter of your safety and well-being. A cold dread far colder than the ultrasound gel seeped into Katja's bones. What is it? Torin had a severe case of mumps as a teenager? She began, her voice low and steady. It was complicated by a condition called orchitis, inflammation of the testicles. The medical terms meant little to Katja. She was still stuck on the word mistake. The inflammation caused significant irreparable damage. Dr. Sharma continued, her gaze unwavering. We ran a series of tests on him afterward. I have the records here. Katja, Torin Hawthorne is and has been since he was 16 years old completely and irreversibly sterile. His condition is called azoospermia. There is a 0% chance that he can conceive a child naturally. The room began to spin. The black and white image of her baby on the screen seemed to mock her. 0% chance. Sterile. Irreversible. What are you saying? She stammered, her mind refusing to connect the dots. Dr. Sharma's voice was gentle, but her words were devastatingly clear. I'm saying, Katja, that Torin knows he cannot be the father of your baby. The pieces clicked into place with the force of a gunshot. His muted reaction to the pregnancy, his distance, his controlling nature, and the whisper. It's a mistake. The mistake wasn't the baby. The mistake wasn't the pregnancy. The mistake was that she had gotten pregnant at all, because he knew with absolute scientific certainty that he wasn't the father. He hadn't been accusing the baby of being a mistake. He had been accusing her. The drive home from Dr. Sharma's office was a blur. Thomas Torin's stoic driver navigated through the city traffic with his usual silent competence, occasionally glancing at Katja in the rearview mirror, his brow furrowed with what might have been concern. She sat numbly in the back of the Bentley, the plush leather feeling like a cage. Her hand rested protectively on her belly, a gesture that was now fraught with a terrifying new meaning. Dr. Sharma's words echoed in her mind, a relentless, deafening drumbeat. Sterile. Irreversible. 0% chance. The doctor had been kind. She had given Katja a glass of water, a box of tissues, and the space to let the initial shock wash over her. She had also given her a warning. A man like Torin Hawthorne, with his resources and his pride. He will not take this revelation lightly, Katja. He is not a man who likes his narrative to be challenged. Be careful. She had printed a copy of the diagnostic report from Torin's file, a document dated over a decade ago, signed by a Dr. Alistair Finch, detailing the diagnosis of azoospermia. Proof is your only power now, she'd said, sliding it into a plain manila envelope. Guard this with your life. Back in the sterile perfection of the observatory, Katja walked through the cavernous living room like a ghost. The Warhol prints on the wall seemed to scream in silent mockery. The cityscape outside, usually a source of comfort, felt alien and menacing. Her whole life, this beautiful, curated life, was a lie, a meticulously constructed sham. She had not cheated on Torin. Not once. The very idea was absurd. She loved him, or she had loved the man she thought he was. Her mind raced frantically, trying to find an explanation. Any explanation other than the one staring her in the face. A miracle. A misdiagnosis. A 1 in a billion chance. But Dr. Sharma's certainty had been absolute. The proof was in the envelope clutched in her hand. If she hadn't cheated and he was sterile, then how was she pregnant? The question was a black hole threatening to swallow her whole. Torin came home late that evening. She heard his keys in the door, the soft click as he locked it behind him. She was sitting in the dark, the envelope on the marble coffee table in front of her. She hadn't moved for hours. He switched on a low lamp and the room was bathed in a soft golden glow. He loosened his tie, his movements fluid and confident. Katya. Why are you sitting in the dark? He didn't sound angry, just weary. The powerful CEO home from a long day of empire building. We need to talk, Torin, she said, her voice surprisingly steady. He sighed, running a hand through his perfectly styled dark hair. Can it wait? The Sterling Thorne deal is at a critical juncture. I'm exhausted. No, she said, her voice gaining strength. It can't wait. She gestured to the envelope. I had a very enlightening conversation with Dr. Sharma today, after you left. A flicker of something anger, fear crossed his face before being instantly suppressed, replaced by a look of paternalistic concern. He walked over and sat in the armchair opposite her, creating a deliberate distance between them. Are you all right? Is the baby okay? You seemed overwrought at the clinic. The casual cruelty of his words, the way he pretended her distress was just hormonal imbalance, ignited a fire in her chest. The baby is fine. But you know that, don't you? You saw the heartbeat. You also called our baby a mistake. He had the grace to look momentarily uncomfortable. Katya, you misheard. The room was noisy. I was talking about the merger. Don't lie to me, Torin, she said, her voice rising. Don't you dare lie to me. I heard you perfectly, and now I know why you said it. She pushed the envelope across the table. Dr. Sharma showed me this. Your medical file. From when you were 16. He glanced at the envelope but didn't touch it. A slow, cold smile spread across his lips, and the mask of the concerned husband dissolved, revealing the monster beneath. It was a chilling transformation. Dr. Sharma seems to have a problem with patient confidentiality, he said smoothly, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous tone. I'll have my legal team address that with the hospital board. She'll be lucky to practice medicine in this state again. This isn't about Dr. Sharma. This is about you, about us. Katya was on her feet now, her body trembling with a mixture of rage and terror. You're sterile, Torin. You have been for years. You knew you couldn't be this baby's father. You let me believe. You let me think I was going crazy. Why? He stood up, his height and presence suddenly overwhelming in the dimly lit room. He was no longer the charming man she had married. He was a predator. I didn't let you believe anything, Katya, he purred, taking a step towards her. I reacted to a simple biological fact. You came to me, told me you were pregnant. I am your husband. What was I to conclude? The implication hit her like a physical blow. You think I cheated on you. He gave a small, dismissive shrug. The science is quite clear. I cannot have children. You are having a child. The conclusion is elementary, my dear. I was willing, for the sake of appearances, to overlook your indiscretion, to raise the child as my own, to give it the Hawthorne name, the Hawthorne legacy. All I asked for was your discretion. But you couldn't even manage that. You had to create this drama. It was gaslighting of the highest order. So complete, so audacious that for a moment she almost questioned her own reality. He was twisting her fidelity into a betrayal, her joy into a scandal. He was painting himself as the magnanimous, cuckolded husband willing to forgive her transgression for the sake of his name. The mistake he'd referred to wasn't just her pregnancy. It was her failure to keep the secret of her affair. I never cheated on you, she whispered, horrified. I would never. Then how do you explain it? He shot back, his voice like a whip. A divine, immaculate conception. Did an angel visit you while I was closing the deal in Tokyo? Tears streamed down her face, hot and furious. I don't know. That's what I'm asking you, but I know I was faithful to you. He laughed, a short, ugly sound devoid of humor. Fidelity, a quaint concept. It doesn't matter anymore. You've made it matter. By bringing this out into the open, you've forced my hand. He walked to the bar and poured himself a whiskey, his back to her. You will carry this child. When it is born, you will sign over all parental rights to me. I will have a non-disclosure agreement drawn up, a very generous one. You will be well compensated for your Services. Then you will disappear. You will move to Europe or California, I don't care. You will never contact me or the child again. Katya stared at him aghast. You want to buy my baby? You want me to give you my child and just leave? It's not your child, he said, turning to face her, his eyes like chips of ice. Genetically, it is half yours. But it will be a hawthorn. It will be raised as my heir. You are merely the vessel. A very beautiful but ultimately disappointing vessel. The cruelty was breathtaking. He was systematically dismantling her identity, wife, partner, and now mother. She was nothing to him but a means to an end, an incubator for an heir he desperately needed but couldn't produce himself. Her mind reeled back to the central impossible question. If she hadn't cheated and he was sterile, the answer had to lie somewhere in the space between those two truths. And Torin, in his arrogance, had just given her a clue. He wasn't surprised by the pregnancy. He was angry it had become complicated. He had a plan already in place. This wasn't a shock to him. This was an inconvenience. Her fear began to morph into something else. A cold, hard resolve. He was a liar. He was a manipulator. And he had underestimated her. No, she said the word tasting of newfound power. He raised an eyebrow. No, no. I will not give you my child. I will not disappear. And I will find out the truth. For the first time since she'd met him, Torin Hawthorne looked genuinely surprised. He studied her for a long moment, a predator reassessing its prey. Then he smiled again, that same chilling, empty smile. You have nothing, Katya, he said softly. You signed a prenuptial agreement that leaves you with exactly what you came with, which was nothing. You have no job. Your friends are my friends. Your family is... Where exactly? That brother you never speak to. You live in my home. You eat my food. You wear my clothes. You are nothing without me. Do not make the mistake of thinking you can fight me. It's a battle you will lose. Miserably. He finished his whiskey and placed the glass down with a decisive click. The offer stands until the day you give birth. Think carefully about your next move, because I will be thinking about mine. He walked out of the room, leaving her alone in the silence. But this time the silence was different. It was no longer empty. It was filled with the clarion call of war. He was right about one thing. She had a brother. A brother she hadn't spoken to in years because he'd seen the monster in Torin long before she had. Her hands were shaking as she pulled out her phone. She scrolled through the contacts past the names of society wives and charity organizers until she found the one she was looking for, Liam Vance, her estranged, brilliant lawyer brother, her only hope. She pressed the call button, her heart pounding against her ribs. He answered on the second ring. Katya. His voice was full of surprise. They hadn't spoken since her wedding day when he'd pulled her aside and begged her not to marry Torin. He's a shark, Katya. He'll eat you alive. She had called him jealous and dramatic. Liam, she sobbed, the dam of her composure finally breaking. Liam, I need your help. You were right. You were right about everything. There was a moment of stunned silence on the other end of the line, followed by the sound of a chair scraping against a floor. Katya. What's wrong? Where are you? Liam's voice had shed its surprise and was now sharp with concern. I'm at home. At the penthouse, she choked out between sobs. Liam, I'm in trouble. I'm pregnant and Torin. I'm on my way. He cut in. No hesitation. Don't say anything else over the phone. Are you safe right now? Is he there? He's here, but in his study. I'm okay for now. Lock your bedroom door. Don't talk to him. I'll be there in 30 minutes. Just hang on, Katya. I'm coming. The line went dead. For the first time in hours, a tiny sliver of hope pierced through Katya's terror. Liam had always been her protector. Growing up, he was the one who'd patched up her scraped knees and stood up to bullies. He'd gone to Columbia Law while she'd pursued art history at NYU. Their paths diverged, but the bond had been unbreakable until Torrin had systematically severed it, framing Liam's protectiveness as jealousy and disapproval of his wealth. "He can't stand to see you happy, Katya," Torrin had said, and she, a fool, had believed him. True to his word, 30 minutes later the intercom buzzed. It was the front desk. "Mr. Hawthorne, a Mr. Liam Vance is here to see you." The doorman, of course, assumed Liam was here to see the man of the house. Torrin's voice came over the internal speaker, cold and clipped. "I'm not expecting a Mr. Vance. Send him away." Her blood ran cold. He was trying to isolate her completely. She grabbed her phone and texted Liam frantically. "He won't let you up. He's trying to block me in." Liam's reply was almost instant. "Go to the service elevator at the end of the hall. Now!" Her heart hammered against her ribs. The service elevator was used by catering staff and maintenance. Torrin would never think to monitor it. She slipped out of the living room, her bare feet silent on the cold marble floors. She could hear Torrin on a phone call in his study, his voice a low, angry murmur. She crept down the long hallway past the gallery of curated art, her hand still protectively on her belly. The service elevator was utilitarian and stark. She jabbed the button and prayed. The doors slid open with a quiet hum, and there stood Liam. He looked older than she remembered. His sandy hair was a little shorter, and there were fine lines around his eyes. But those eyes were the same, fiercely intelligent and full of a protective warmth that she suddenly realized she had been starved of for 3 years. He pulled her into a hug, and she clung to him, the sobs she'd been suppressing finally breaking free. "It's okay," he murmured, his voice rough with emotion. "I've got you. Let's get out of here." They rode the elevator down in silence. He led her out a back exit into a grimy alley she'd never known existed, a world away from the polished lobby of Park Avenue. The cold night air was a shock to her system. He hailed a yellow cab, and soon they were speeding away, the glittering lights of her prison shrinking in the distance. Liam's apartment in Greenwich Village was the complete antithesis of her penthouse. It was cluttered with books, legal pads, and a friendly-looking ficus tree. It smelled of coffee and old paper. It felt real. He sat her down on a worn leather sofa, wrapped a blanket around her shoulders, and made her a cup of tea. As she sipped the hot, sweet liquid, the story came tumbling out. She told him everything. The ultrasound. Torrin's whisper. Dr. Sharma's revelation. The medical report which she'd had the presence of mind to shove into her purse. The horrifying confrontation, the gaslighting, Torrin's ultimatum to take her baby and disappear. Liam listened without interruption, his expression growing darker with every word. He took the medical report and read it carefully, his lawyerly gaze missing nothing. When she was finished, a heavy silence filled the room. "That son of a bitch," he said, his voice a low growl. "I knew he was a controlling bastard, but this is sociopathic." He looked at her, his eyes full of a pain that mirrored her own. "Katya, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry I didn't fight harder for you." "It's not your fault," she whispered. "He's a master manipulator. He isolated me and I let him." Liam shook his head. "No more. That ends tonight. First things first. He can't force you to give up your child. Parental rights are not a commodity to be bought and sold. His threats are designed to terrorize you into submission. But he has so much power, Liam. The best lawyers, the judges. He told me he'd ruin Dr. Sharma." "He'll try," Liam said, his jaw tight. "But Dr. Sharma has ethics on her side, and a good lawyer, which I will make sure she has, can argue that her duty of care to you, a patient in clear distress, superseded her duty of confidentiality to him, especially when he was using that confidentiality to perpetrate fraud and emotional abuse." He started pacing his mind, clearly working. "The prenup is another issue. Torrin's legal team is the best money can buy. They would have made it ironclad. He's right that you'd likely walk away with very little. But we're not going after his money. We're going for something more important, your freedom, your child, and the truth." He stopped and looked at her. "Katya, this is critical. You said you never cheated. Never." she said with absolute conviction. I believe you, he said immediately. Which leaves a gaping hole in the middle of this. You are pregnant. He is sterile. He knew he was sterile. Yet he wasn't entirely surprised by the pregnancy. He was just angry it became public knowledge between you. He already had a plan to take the baby. This suggests he was expecting a child. Just not in this messy way. Her own thoughts, which had been a chaotic storm, began to clear as Liam laid them out with such logical precision. He was expecting a child. She repeated the idea, solidifying. So, how? There are ways, Liam said, starting to list them on his fingers. Surrogacy, for one. But you're the one who's pregnant, so that's out. Adoption possible, but the timeline doesn't fit. That leaves assisted reproductive technology. IVF. The acronym hung in the air. In vitro fertilization. But IVF, with what she asked, confused. His sperm is non-viable. Exactly? Liam said, his eyes gleaming with a hunter's intensity. It would have to be with donor sperm. But you would know if you went through an IVF cycle, Katya. The hormone injections, the procedures. You'd know. She shook her head. No, nothing like that ever happened. They were silent for a moment, both staring at the impossible puzzle. A pregnancy without intercourse with a fertile partner, and without a clinical IVF procedure. It made no sense. Unless... Liam began slowly, his eyes narrowing. Unless the insemination happened without your knowledge. The blood drained from her face. What? How is that even possible? I don't know, he admitted. It sounds like something out of a spy novel. But with a man like Torin, a man with infinite resources and a complete lack of a moral compass, we can't rule anything out. We have to start thinking like he does. Where are the vulnerabilities? Where could he have intervened? He grabbed a legal pad and a pen. Okay, let's be systematic. Think back. Katya, any unusual medical appointments? Procedures? Even a routine checkup that felt off? Any new vitamins or medications he insisted you take? She racked her brain, replaying the last 9 months in her head. Torin was obsessed with their health, but she had always seen it as part of his controlling nature. He'd switched her gynecologist about a year ago to a private clinic. He'd vetted a place called the Westwood Wellness Clinic, run by a Dr. Lena Hansen. It was exclusive, expensive, and catered to the city's elite. She'd had her annual checkup there. There was my annual pap smear at the Westwood Clinic, she said slowly. About 9 months ago. It was routine. Dr. Hansen was very professional, very slick. Anything else? Torin started me on a new regimen of prenatal vitamins about a month before that, she recalled. He had them specially formulated by a compounding pharmacy in Switzerland. He said they were the purest, most effective ones available. Liam wrote it all down. Westwood Wellness Clinic. Dr. Lena Hansen. Swiss vitamins. He looked up at her. It's a long shot, Katya, but this is where we start digging. We need to find out who owns Westwood, who Dr. Hansen is connected to, and we need to get our hands on one of those vitamin bottles. He looked at the blanket draped over her, at her exhausted, tear-stained face. His expression softened. But first you need to rest. You're safe here. Torin doesn't know this address. I moved 3 years ago after the wedding. The unspoken words hung in the air after she chose him over her brother. Tomorrow, Liam said, his voice firm with resolve, we start fighting back, and our first objective is a strategic retreat. You can't go back to the penthouse. We need to get your essential belongings, your passport, your personal documents, anything of sentimental value. We have to do it fast before he realizes you've bolted and locks everything down. The thought of going back into that gilded cage, even for a moment, filled her with dread. But Liam was right. She couldn't let Torin erase every trace of her existence. He'll be at his office all morning. she said, her voice barely a whisper. "He has a board meeting. He'll be gone from 8 a.m. to at least noon." Liam nodded. "Okay, we have a 4-hour window. We go in, we get your things, and we get out. And then we disappear while I start digging into Mr. Torrin Hawthorne's beautifully curated world. I have a feeling we're about to find some very ugly secrets hidden in the fine print." That night, huddled on Liam's sofa, Katya finally slept. It was a restless sleep, punctuated by nightmares of cold whispers and icy smiles. But for the first time in a long time, she wasn't alone in the dark. She had an ally, and they had a plan. The great Torrin Hawthorne had made a critical error. He had pushed her so far that she had nothing left to lose, and in doing so, he had transformed his polished, docile wife into an adversary. He had no idea the war he had just started. The next morning, the city was shrouded in a gray, determined drizzle that matched Katya's mood. Liam had already been up for hours, a pot of strong coffee brewing, his laptop open on the dining table, which was now Command Central. "I did a preliminary search on the Westwood Wellness Clinic," he said, handing her a mug. "It's a private entity owned by a holding company called Ethelred Capital. Very opaque. But I found something interesting. The listed agent for Ethelred is a law firm, Sloan, Finch & Associates." The name hit her like a jolt. Finch. The doctor who signed Torrin's sterility report was Dr. Alistair Finch. "Exactly," Liam said, his eyes glinting. "It could be a coincidence, but in this world, I don't believe in them. It seems Dr. Finch didn't just diagnose Torrin. He may have stayed in the family's orbit, or at least his firm did." The connection was chilling. The doctor who knew Torrin's most profound secret was linked to the clinic where she had her last checkup before the pregnancy. It felt like a deliberate, carefully woven web. "We have to go," she said, her resolve hardening. "The clock is ticking." Liam had arranged for a discreet car service, not a yellow cab. "Torrin will have eyes," he'd said. "Assume we're being watched." The journey back to Park Avenue was fraught with a new kind of terror. This wasn't her home anymore. It was enemy territory. She was a spy on a mission. As planned, Torrin's Bentley was gone from the private garage. They used the service elevator again. Liam carried 2 large empty duffel bags. "Essentials only, Katya," he cautioned as they stepped into the silent, opulent foyer. "Documents, sentimental items, clothes you can't live without. Nothing he can track. Leave the jewelry he bought you. It's just another set of chains." The penthouse was eerily quiet. It was as if the argument from the night before had been sucked into the expensive upholstery, leaving behind a charged, toxic residue. While Liam stood watch at the door, Katya flew into action. She went straight to their bedroom, a vast space of cool grays and chrome that had always felt more like a hotel suite than a sanctuary. She grabbed her passport, her birth certificate, and a small box of old family photos from her bedside table. She packed jeans, sweaters, and sensible shoes, the clothes of the woman she used to be before Torrin had dressed her up like a doll. She left the designer gowns and jewel-encrusted heels hanging in the closet like the shed skin of a former life. Then her eyes fell on the ensuite bathroom. On the marble countertop sat a sleek silver bottle. "Vie éternelle prenatal formula," the elegant script read. "Torrin's specially compounded Swiss vitamins." Her heart pounded. She grabbed the bottle along with a sealed, unopened one from the medicine cabinet. This could be the proof they needed. Her final stop was Torrin's study. It was a place she rarely entered, his sanctum sanctorum. The room was dark, paneled in mahogany, and smelled of leather and his expensive cologne. It was the heart of his empire and his secrets. "Katya, we need to go," Liam whispered from the doorway. "Just 1 minute," she said, her instincts screaming at her. She went behind his massive desk. She didn't know what she was looking for. His computer was password protected. But in his top desk drawer beneath a stack of neatly organized papers was a slim leather-bound folio. It wasn't a company document. It looked private. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. The first page was a contract, a service agreement between Torrin Hawthorne and a company she'd never heard of, the Genesis Clinic. Her eyes scanned the legalese until they landed on a phrase that made the air freeze in her lungs. For services rendered in the procurement and cryopreservation of donor gametes. Donor gametes. Sperm. She flipped the page. It was a profile. A donor profile. Donor 734. It listed his physical characteristics, height, hair color, eye color, all remarkably similar to Torin's. It listed his academic achievements and a clean bill of health. But the name was redacted, blacked out with a thick marker. Then she saw the payment schedule. A series of large wire transfers from a private account of Torin's to the Genesis Clinic. And below that, a second set of payments. A monthly retainer paid to a woman, Serafina Dubois. The memo line for each payment was the same consulting fee. Who was Serafina Dubois? A consultant for what? And why was Torin paying a fertility clinic for donor sperm when he was supposedly trying to have a baby with his wife, Katya? Now Liam's voice was urgent. She snapped a picture of every page with her phone, her hands shaking so badly the first few were blurry. She shoved the folio back in the drawer and ran out of the study, her heart threatening to beat its way out of her chest. As they were about to leave, the main elevator dinged. Her blood turned to ice. It couldn't be Torin. He was at his board meeting. The elevator doors slid open and a woman stepped out. She was in her late 60s, impeccably dressed in a Chanel suit, her silver hair styled in a flawless chignon. Her face was a mask of aristocratic disdain. It was Jessamine Hawthorne, Torin's mother. She surveyed the scene, Katya clutching a purse, Liam holding 2 duffel bags, and her thin lips curled into a semblance of a smile. It didn't reach her cold, calculating eyes. "Well, well," she said, her voice as crisp and brittle as old money. "Leaving so soon, Katya? And with your brother, the little radical?" I see Torin's assessment of the situation was, as always, astute. Liam stepped in front of Katya protectively. "Mrs. Hawthorne, we're leaving." Jessamine's gaze swept over him dismissively before landing back on Katya. "Are you foolish little girl. Did you really think you could just walk away? Did you think my family would allow a complication like you to disrupt everything?" "This has nothing to do with you, Jessamine," Katya said, finding her voice. "Oh, but it has everything to do with me," she replied, taking a step closer. The scent of her expensive perfume, Jean Patou's Joy, filled the air, a cloying, suffocating fragrance. A legacy is at stake. The Hawthorne name, my grandchild. Her eyes dropped to Katya's stomach and her expression softened into something that for a terrifying moment looked like warmth. "You don't have to run, dear. We can be reasonable. Torin is angry, yes. He is proud. But he can be managed. I can talk to him." She opened her handbag and pulled out a checkbook. "You are carrying a Hawthorne. That makes you important to us. But you are not equipped to be its mother. Give us the child. I will personally see to it that you are set up for life. A new name, a beautiful home in the south of France. Anything you desire. You can live out your days in comfort. All you have to do is sign the papers after the birth and walk away." It was the same offer Torin had made, but coated in a veneer of matriarchal concern that was somehow more repulsive. She wasn't just offering to buy the baby. She was offering Katya a golden cage in exchange for her soul. "He is not a Hawthorne," Katya said, her voice shaking with rage. "I don't know who he is, but he is not a Hawthorne. And he is my son. Mine. He is not for sale." Jessamine's mask of civility crumbled. Her face hardened, her eyes flashing with a venomous fury that was so much like her son's. "You ungrateful little tramp. You come into my son's life with nothing, and this is how you repay him, by opening your legs to some stranger and trying to pass off your bastard child as his." "That's enough," Liam said, his voice deadly calm. "We're done here." He took Katya's arm and steered her toward the service elevator. Jessamine's voice followed them down the hall, shrill and laced with panic. "You won't get away with this. Torin will find you. He will take that child from you, and he will leave you with nothing. You will be ruined. Do you hear me? Ruined. The service elevator doors slid shut, cutting off her tirade. Katja collapsed against the wall, trembling uncontrollably. She had known Torin was a monster, but now she knew the monstrosity was inherited. The entire Hawthorne family was rotten to the core. They didn't care about a child. They cared about an heir, a commodity. Back in the car, speeding away from that life for good, Katja showed Liam the photos on her phone. He scrolled through them, his brow furrowed in concentration. The Genesis Clinic, he muttered. Donor 734, Serafina Dubois. He looked up at her, his eyes dark with a chilling realization. Katja, this is darker than we imagined. He wasn't just hiding his sterility. He had a plan, an elaborate premeditated plan to create an heir using a donor, and he was going to pass the child off as his own. But how did I get pregnant? She cried, the question still tormenting her. If I didn't have IVF, how did the donor sperm? Liam looked at the picture of the vitamin bottle, then back at the legal documents on the phone. I don't know for sure, he said slowly, his voice grim. But I have a sickening theory. It's called cryptic insemination. It's highly unethical, illegal in most places, and almost impossible to prove. But for a man with Torin's resources and connections to Dr. Finch's network and a private clinic, he wouldn't need your consent if he could bypass it entirely. The implication was horrifying. The vitamins from Switzerland. The private clinic. Dr. Hansen. Had her routine checkup been anything but? Had she been inseminated like livestock without her knowledge or consent? It was a violation so profound she couldn't wrap her mind around it. Now we have a name. Liam said, his voice like steel. Serafina Dubois. She's the key. We find her. We find out her role in all this, and we find out the identity of donor 734. He looked at Katja, his hand covering hers. This is our new mission. We're not just escaping Katja. We're hunting. They went to ground, retreating to a secluded family cabin in the Catskills. The isolation was a balm to Katja's fractured nerves. While she focused on her health, Liam converted the rustic living room into a war room. He hired a sharp private investigator, an ex-cop named Marcus Thorne, who began charting the dark constellation of Torin's deceit, the doctors, the clinics, and the mysterious Serafina Dubois. The first breakthrough came from the unopened bottle of Swiss vitamins. Liam had it sent to a lab for analysis. The results were sickening. It's worse than we thought, Liam said, his face grim as he read the report. The pills weren't just nutrients. They contained a powerful sedative and a cocktail of hormones designed to optimize fertility. The clinical words painted a horrifying picture. He was drugging me, Katja whispered, the violation stealing her breath. She had been an unwilling participant in her own pregnancy. Her anger, once a spark, now hardened into cold, unbreakable resolve. Soon after Marcus Thorne's investigation bore fruit, the money trail laundered through shell corporations led him to Serafina Dubois. He found her address in a discreet Soho apartment building. I have to see her, Katja declared, her voice firm. The time for hiding was over. They approached with caution. While Liam and Marcus waited nearby, Katja went to the building alone, her heart a steady drum against her ribs. She buzzed the apartment. My name is Katja Hawthorne, she said into the intercom, her voice clear. We need to talk about Torin. After a tense silence, the lock clicked open. The woman who answered the door. Serafina was not the cold accomplice Katja had envisioned. She was elegant, with intelligent, weary eyes that held a universe of regret. Mrs. Hawthorne, she said softly, I knew this day would come. Please come in. Inside the minimalist apartment, the truth finally spilled out. I was a geneticist. Serafina began, her hands trembling. I ran a fertility clinic called Genesis. Torin came to me years ago, obsessed with having a biological heir he knew he could never produce. When I told him it was impossible, he changed the plan. He wanted a child that appeared to be his using a donor who was a perfect physical match. Donor 734. Katya breathed. Serafina nodded, but that wasn't enough for him. He insisted the child be carried by you to complete the illusion. I told him it was illegal, a monstrous ethical breach. But he had leveraged my brother's gambling debts. Torin paid them, and in return he owned me. He forced me to orchestrate everything. The drugged vitamins, the procedure. Dr. Hansen at the Westwood Clinic was one of his puppets, too. Her voice broke. I am so sorry. I've lived with this guilt every day. The confession was damning, but one final crucial question remained. Who was the donor? Katya asked, her voice trembling. Who is my baby's father? A fresh wave of fear washed over Serafina's face. Torin's cruelty has layers, she explained. He wanted the donor to be someone he could control completely, an insurance policy. He chose his younger brother, Michael. The name landed with the force of a physical blow. Michael Hawthorne, the disowned artist, the family disgrace. Torin despised him, Serafina whispered. He found Michael, offered him life-changing money to be the donor, and forced him to sign an NDA and disappear. It was his ultimate twisted victory to use the genetics of the brother he hated to create the heir he would raise as his own. Armed with Serafina's sworn affidavit, Liam's team moved swiftly. They located Michael Hawthorne living a quiet, anonymous life in a small town on the coast of Maine. He was a painter of melancholic seascapes, a man haunted by a deal he had never fully understood. Katya traveled to Maine to meet him. Standing on a wind-swept cliff overlooking the Atlantic, she saw a man who shared Torin's frame, but none of his menace. His eyes were kind. They were her baby's eyes. I am so sorry, Michael said, his voice thick with regret. I never knew. In that moment, standing beside the stranger, who was the biological father of her child, Katya felt the last piece of the puzzle click into place. He was not a ghost. He was family. The final confrontation was not a dramatic showdown, but a swift legal execution. Liam presented Torin's lawyers with their arsenal, Serafina's testimony, the lab reports, Michael's statement, and the threat of criminal charges for assault and unlawful insemination. The story, if made public, would not just tarnish the Hawthorne name, it would obliterate the entire empire. Jessamine Hawthorne attempted a desperate smear campaign, but against the mountain of evidence it was useless. Faced with total ruin, Torin folded. The divorce was quiet and absolute. The fraudulent prenup was voided, and Katya accepted a settlement that would ensure her child's security. She refused to take a penny more of his blood money. Torin relinquished all paternal rights in exchange for their silence on Michael's identity, a final pathetic attempt to control a narrative he had already lost. Katya walked away from the marriage with her freedom, her dignity, and the precious life inside her. 2 months later, she gave birth to a beautiful, healthy boy. She named him Liam after the brother who had saved her, and gave him the last name Vance. He had his Uncle Michael's kind eyes and his mother's resilient spirit. Michael became a quiet, loving presence in their lives, his art slowly filling with a light that had long been absent. Katya never saw Torin or Jessamine again. The last she heard, Hawthorne Holdings was in turmoil, and Torin had become a recluse in his golden penthouse, a king ruling an empire of shadows. He had his legacy, but he was utterly alone, having lost the future he tried so desperately to steal. Katya, however, had found hers. It wasn't a life of opulence, but it was real, and it was free. Katya's journey started with a shocking betrayal in the cold, sterile light of an ultrasound room, and ended with her reclaiming her strength, her identity, and her future. She escaped a gilded cage, exposed a web of lies that ran deeper than she could ever have imagined, and fought for the most precious thing in her life, her child. Her story is a powerful testament to resilience, the unbreakable bond of family, and the fact that truth is a power that even a millionaire's money cannot suppress. What would you have done in Katya's position? Let us know in the comments below.